Greetings and welcome back to the Old Ways Rising Farm YouTube channel, where we are doing the final video on the adventure pack, which I am currently wearing. It's a little bit tight for me because I made these straps for my wife and her shoulders are smaller than mine. But that's okay. That's why we have adjustable belt buckles. This is the final thing. Now, in previous videos, we put all of this together, and in this video we're doing some of the final accents, particularly the rope grommets here on the side, which allow you to do a horseshoe bedroll and lash it down the sides. We have grommets on the bottom so that you can tie either a sleeping pad or a tent or something like that on the bottom of the pack. That way those big things don't take up the volume of the pack, and you can have this for, you know, small items, fire kit, food, repair kit, first aid kit, etc., right? That goes in here, and then those really big things, you know, your sleep system and tent, can go, roll, and underneath, okay? We have also in this video attached the buckles to fully complete the straps. As I said, this is sized for Renee, so I just have one set of holes right here at the top, but we have 6 inches that we can extend this for either a larger body person or a smaller body person wearing a big old coat in the middle of winter, right? So we have room to grow with this, but it's not so long that it's flapping around being annoying down underneath. Okay? We also in this video attach the ties and just talk about all of these little finishing bits. If you've been watching this series straight along, you've heard me say several times we're working on the pattern, but it's not up yet. Well, it's up yet. Okay? So if you go to the Patreon, you can get the pattern for this pack and complete 4 or 5 page, I forget exactly what it came out to, set of written instructions and the pattern to go along with this video tutorial series. The only thing that you need, that I want to say about the pattern, is that the strap arrangement is buckle dependent. Okay, so I give a set of suggestions for the buckle in, you know, for a strap arrangement in the pattern. However, if you use different buckle setups, you may need to modify that. So depending on the width of webbing that you choose, I went with 2.5 inch wide webbing for this project for maximum comfort and spreading the load over the shoulders. But depending on the width of webbing you choose and the type of buckle that you choose, you may need to modify this. And your final lengths of everything are going to be determined by your torso size. So as you go along, leave yourself plenty of extra space, and then you can trim down to what fits as you kind of do a preliminary, what woodworkers would call a dry fit, where you make sure all your joinery works before you actually glue it all together, right? You want to do a dry fit, in air quotes, on this to make sure that your straps are all long enough, because, you know, if the webbing's a little too short, you can leave the leather a little bit long. You know, if the leather's a little too long, you can cut it back, right? But you want to, right before the final assembly, put it on your shoulders and have somebody else like mark and measure and show you where everything is, so you can do a nice final lineup. So if you've been following along waiting for the pattern, it's up, and come along and we'll show you how to do the finishing touches on the Old Ways Rising Farm Adventure Pack. So one of the things I want to adjust on this is where these corners came together. There's an open spot where we have, you know, kind of some slightly frayed ends from the edge of the canvas and the rope sticking through. So we want to put a covering on here. And you could do basically 2 strategies. You could put some sort of tape or bias ply over top of that, okay, and just stitch it around the edges. But, you know, especially since this is 3 ends coming together, I'm going to do the second approach, which is to stitch over top of it. Okay, so we're going to do what's called ring bolt hitching across the edge and then up the side. Okay, it makes just a nice finished edge. And then here on the back, where we have all of this going on, we're not going to go up the side, we're just going to go around that curve. And it puts a nice corner protector on there. It protects the corner, right? So if this wears or frays, all we'll need to do is restitch it. We won't need to do anything with the fabric itself. So we're going to do that here, and then we're also going to do that across this surface, across the top, where you can see where this came together nicely here in the middle, but at the edge there was a little bit of fudging for length of fabric right at that corner. Okay, turn it off. Now you can do as much or as little of this as you want, right? This is an extra aesthetic. It provides a little bit of protection, but mostly we're kind of doing an aesthetic thing here. So do what you like. I am going to start right here at the juncture where I kind of lost having enough seam allowance and cover over the rope underneath here. So we can start either inside or outside. It doesn't much matter. We're going to start, put our twine through. Now this twine I unlaid, threaded, and relayed like we've been doing with the heavy twine, like we did with the grommets here. We're going to pull it through. We're going to leave about an inch or so sticking out. And this is not going to get knotted. We're just going to stitch over it and trap it underneath these stitches. Especially for something cosmetic like this, that's plenty to do. Now, we're going to come back the same direction we just started to make a loop. We're going to adjust that loop so that it comes right to the middle top. Okay? Now we're going to come through there, hook into it, double back, sew through from inside to outside, which makes another loop. Okay? So I'm going to pull this almost taut, comes through the loop with the needle, pull it all the way taut, and then pull the standing end tight. Okay? Now, the key to, that gets us started. The key to ring bolt hitching is every stitch you go through from the opposite direction. So that stitch we came from inside to outside, so the next stitch will come from outside to inside. Okay? Now I don't really need to use the sailor's palm as much here because I'm only stitching really through one layer of cloth. Okay? So outside to inside, push the needle back through the loop, pull the loop tight, pull the twine tight. Okay? Now this time, inside to outside, switch direction. Make sure I'm underneath my tag end. Okay. Come through the loop. Pull the loop tight. Pull the twine tight. Switch again. Outside to inside. Through the loop, pull the loop tight, pull the twine tight. And you can see what we're doing. We're making a loop, like we're getting a series of interlocking loops from opposing directions all the way along, and it leaves this really nice combing effect. Okay? Doesn't matter which direction you start in, the key is to go alternating, inside to outside, outside to inside to outside, back and forth, because you always want to come through that loop and then oppose the direction of the loop when you form the next one. Okay. That's the key to ring bolt hitching. And there's a whole bunch of different varieties and ways of doing ring bolt hitching, but they all come back to this idea. you're forming a loop and then pulling through it. So you have interlocking loops from opposite directions, and it leaves a really nice looking finished edge. Now, when we're done, what we're going to do to finish it is just to go under 3 or 4 stitches with the needle, pull the thread through, and then cut it off. And then to start another thread, same thing. We'll go the opposite direction through, 3, 4 stitches, start looping, and once it's secure, cut the tag off. The next thing we want to do is put all of these grommets on the side like this. This is so that we can attach strings, we can attach little side bags to this, we can do, sort of a horseshoe bedroll around the top and lash it down the sides. We're going to do 4 down each side, and then we're going to do 5 down the bottom because this is just a little bit longer. Then also again, right, we could put a bedroll underneath here and tie it around through those grommets. Now, we're going to be using rope grommets. The other way that you could do this would be like the original Boy Scout packs did it, which is metal grommets with a tab. I don't like this system because that is sewn directly into the main seam. So if this tears out, either, best case scenario, it tears on the tab and there's no way to really get another one sewn in gracefully, or worst case scenario, the tab holds together and it rips the main seam out. So I don't like this method of attachment. You could, however, do what we're doing with rope grommets with metal grommets if you prefer the metal, and just stitch them on exactly the same way. It would still work. Okay, so this is equally compatible with metal grommets, but I don't like that attachment method. What we're doing is taking these guys and sewing them by looping around the rope harness. So when we put a string in here and start pulling on that to reef it closed, we're just pulling against the rope. We're not pulling against the fabric at all. Okay? And the weak point are the end stitches. That way, when this fails, it will hopefully fail just on the stitch without doing any damage to the main pack. And since it's applied to the outside after the pack is all the way finished, it's easy to replace. Okay? So we always want to think about where it will fail because it will fail. Everything will fail in time. So you can see we have our 1, 2, 3, 4 grommets down the side from the top to the bottom. To make these rope grommets, this is done exactly the same way as we made the first round of rope grommets that we stitched into these eyelet holes. Okay? With the one minor modification that I am tucking the ends over 1, under 2, a single time, just to make it a little bit more secure, okay? Since we are going to be pulling on this. Now the overlap and the overhand knot is right here in the middle in between the 2 tag ends, and that's what we're going to stitch down. So the point of overlap where the tag ends come through is what the pressure is of the stitching is going to be holding against the rope. That will further secure it. So we're going to take our thread. I'll make sure there's a link somewhere in here to that video where we show how to do it. We want to go under the rope in the rope harness. I like how this came out. This little tail coming off of that antler tine has been really handy many times, like poking in and pushing it through tight spots. Okay, so I found my pliers. Do keep one of these handy too. Now, if you don't have one of these or you want to get sewing and don't have time to make one of these, you can just do it with the pliers. Use the pliers as your thimble. It actually works fairly well. Right here where the wire cutter is, if you hold it closed and push that against the back of the needle like so, that actually works fairly well as a thimble. Okay. Now we want to take the tail end. When I twisted this thread up inside the needle, I just knotted it over, so there's a little stopper knot there. Just going to tuck those ends in, grab our piece, thread needle through, come back in 1 thread width down. Now here we want to be careful to position it right where we want it and on the side. So if you look at these, see they're not, let me grab another one. We're not positioning them up on top of the rope, sticking forward. We're positioning them against the side of the rope, laying flat against the side panel of the pack. Okay. So once it is where I want it, we can cinch that up tight. Since it's a thick twine, I can really give it a pull. And by the way, the back of the thumb, the wraparound here, is for exactly this. When you want to give something a good pull, you can put that there, give it a good pull without rope burning your fingers.
That's nifty.
That's what that part of the palm thimble is for. Now we want to go underneath that tag end, do another stitch, and this is just a nothing fancy looping stitch, but we want to make sure that they lay nice and tight and parallel to each other as we go down. Stitch as far down as you want it. I'd really like to have at least 8 or 10 stitches. Again, we're doing this with a very strong twine. So you don't need a whole ton of stitches. We want at least 8 or 10. Okay, just like so. Hope that you're enjoying this content, and if you are, I would love to invite you to join our Patreon page and the community over there. The Patreon and that funding is super important for this channel as well as most YouTube channels. It just takes resources to do these things, to buy materials, to go on trips, to go interview people, to do activities, and we're trying to build and make the channel better in all of those categories. So we're super grateful for everybody who's already there. And if you would like to come and join the ranks of those folks, we have a lot of rewards for the folks who do join on the Patreon. We have a large repository of historic information on traditional skills that have been re-indexed and edited and produced in easy-to-print formats and formats that are easy to put into a page reader. And it's indexed by skill rather than all of the random ways that it was indexed in the past. So you could access what you want. We also have a lot of plans and patterns for various projects, like this shoulder bag that we're going to replicate here soon. The fur stretchers behind me are another example. And all of that library becomes an infinite access resource to you when you join the Patreon at any of the paid tiers, even at $1 a month. If you don't want to join that way, they can be purchased as individual downloads as well. And we're just so grateful for everybody who's there and wanted to invite you. So, hope to see you there, but I also hope you're joining this video, which we'll get back to right now. Okay, so we're all the way along. Now to finish off, we're just going to go under one stitch. Went under 2 stitches, and we want under 1 stitch. If you split a thread here, it's not going to be a big deal. And we just want to kind of do a little overhand knot. Which at this point is kind of getting a little bit tricky. Then when we're done making our overhand knot, just one little twist in there. Now we're going to come and we're going to go. I didn't leave myself quite enough thread here. Just go up a little higher and do it. There. Yeah. There. We want to go under. We don't need to go under the whole pack of stitches, but we want to go under 4 or 5 of them. Tuck the end. This is kind of a bad example. It got a little congested because kind of ran out of thread a little bit. Okay, there's our loop, and we're going under the stack of stitches. Grab my scissors. I'm going to cut that off. And then we can trim these tag ends from making our loop in the first place. Trim them nice and close. And there. We have a rope grommet opposing at the same point on this column. So we're going to, this thing is getting very floppy at this stage to show on camera. Okay, so we're going to keep going, go all the way down here, do 3 more, 4 on each side on the other side, and we're going to do 5 across the bottom. All of them are just evenly distributed in the space that they have. Next thing I want to do here is we're going to put the shoelace on, which is going to stitch right here and then cross over so we can tie it in a bow through these grommet holes. Okay, so we want to just have our piece of shoelace, and I mean you could use shoelace. What I'm using here is like shoelace. It's 1/2 inch wide cotton tape, and I just got a roll of it, so I'm cutting off sections and then just folding the end over and stitching across it a little bit so it doesn't fray. Right? And this is going to be surface applied, so it's a piece that if it ever does fray out, wear out, tear off, it's not a big deal. We can just surface apply another piece. Okay, so no big deal. So I want to 1/2 it and mark the middle of the lace. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm just going to fold this, just kind of with my fingers, pinch a crease here. Now I want to be about like 1/2 finger width in from that crease. Just going to stab the needle through there, kind of mark it. Sewing through a single layer like this, it's not really all that, it's not that hard to push through, so I don't need the sewing palm for this. Okay, same kind of idea here. Just mark, yeah, I'll do this at the top, line up with my crease. Little fiddly to get set up. There's not a really good way to clamp it in. At the same time, it's just a tie, so it's not that big a deal if it's not 100% centered. And then we're just going to stitch as normal, securing it down. We're working on the straps now. So first thing you want to do, you want to make sure that you have a nice thickness of leather to go in the prongs of the strap, if you're using this sort of buckle strap. Okay, so when I started laying this out, I was originally going to use the same leather I used for these other parts, and that'll be fine for the piece that folds over and holds against the base of this buckle, right? Because it's going to get the whole thickness, and it's got plenty of tensile strength. I'm not at all worried about that. But it was a little thin, and the whole weight of this pack is going to hold on those 2 small little points. And leather stretches, right? So you want a thick, fairly meaty piece of leather. So I ended up going and ordering another piece of leather to go in here and perform that function. Okay. Now, sizing. I drew this pattern, you know, with the assumption that you'd have about 1 foot here or 2 feet here and about 1 foot here. The actual sizing of these straps is going to depend on you, your body dimensions. So what you're going to want to do when you get to this point is you're going to want to actually put this thing on and see where it comes. And then adjust the size of these shoulder straps and this leather piece You're going to want at least a foot each to start with, so that you have 6 to 10 inches of overlap here, so that you can, have it fairly close when you have a t-shirt on. But if you have a jacket, you can back up 6 inches or so. Okay? But you don't want some crazy gargantuan amount of extra, leather here flapping around when you're wearing it in shirt sleeves in the summer catching on brush. So you really want to kind of dial this in so that, the combination of where you fold this over to sew on the buckle, okay, and how much cloth you have here is giving you about 6 inches of play, with being close for a t-shirt and longer right here at the end for winter, with a jacket on, okay? So if you're a much larger person or have a much thicker jacket, or you're in the high Arctic, maybe you want more of that, right? But you want to try this on with shirt sleeves and try this on with a jacket, okay? And then you can make that decision. Well, it's on your back, comfortable, this curved stay being right where you want it in the smallest portion of your back, okay? So you just want to feel that out, and the correct measurement is what feels right when it's on your body, okay? This is a place where I give you some starting suggestions in the pattern, but you're probably going to have to modify that substantially so that it fits you, okay? These straps fit Renee very well, and this is going to be her pack. Mine are going to have an extra 1.5 feet on this, okay? Because my just torso thickness and height is sufficiently different that, this where it's coming to her pretty close to her hip, this comes to me pretty close to my chest, okay? And also my pack is sitting further down on my body than hers is, right? So fit this to you. Once you've done that, you've cut your leather pieces, we're going to want to bind the ends of these just like we did up here at the top, where we're cutting a little piece of leather and stitching an X across it, okay? To attach the binding, just stitch a row, just like here. This piece is in the pattern set, okay? And then pre-punch your holes in thick leather. For really thin leather like this, we can just awl through it with a sail needle. In thick leather like this, you're going to be miserable if you try to do that. So pre-punch your holes. You can do that with a drill bit, with an awl, or with a leather punch, okay? I did these with an awl. To save yourself a little bit of effort and, trial and error, this is going to go on like here. So after punching these holes, I transferred it to the back, held it in place, and poked through with the awl in all of those locations to leave myself some little spots, which are approximately where the needle will pass through. So I can't really pre-punch those holes because it's uptight against the cloth, and running it all through there is just going to damage that webbing. But in marking those locations, it makes it a lot easier when the thread's on this side and I need to pass it back through. Okay? Then you sew it on, just as we did here, saddle stitch with an X down the middle for reinforcement. Both of these are now fully attached. We have the nice leather gusset on the back, and we have our leather strips ready to receive holes. So the last thing that we need to do until this is officially a backpack is put on the buckles themselves. Now, while I'm doing this, buckle attachment is the very last step in this whole thing. Selecting it needs to be amongst the very first, right? Because the type of buckle you choose is going to dictate the width of this strap, how strong this strap needs to be, and its width. And then all of that needs to be sized to your body, to your dimensions, with taking all of that into consideration. That needs to be done early in this process. And I can't expressly dictate that in a pattern. So in the pattern, the pattern's written up for kind of a basic medium dimension. But get your buckle early, decide how it's going to fit with everything else, and modify that pattern according to your needs. Okay? You can get buckles which will work just directly with the strapping itself, and then you don't need the leather bits. I still would recommend using leather gussets here to stitch against, right, so that you're not pulling right against cloth with these, crucially important weight-bearing components. But that would lead to a completely different size calculation set with this, okay? If you have a backpack that has straps that you can adjust and wear and say, oh, that's comfy there, that'll give you a good start. But this is going to have a spot where it's most comfortable on your back, which isn't going to be exactly the same as a conventional backpack. Okay? So some of this stuff dictated right as soon as you purchase your buckle. Other things you just kind of need to leave a little extra length and be ready to cut back. As you can see, after putting this together on Renee and seeing exactly where everything needs to go, I'm cutting a fairly substantial chunk off of this strap. But I left it long for that reason. Now, where do you want this to be adjusted? Well, you want the strap such that when it's in its last two buckle holes, let me just kind of tuck this in the keeper there, and just barely tucked into the keeper, that is the right length for you in a parka. And when it's choked all the way up, that is the right length for you in a t-shirt. Okay? When that is true, then you have this in the right position. Okay, but you can kind of fiddle. And you can fiddle a little bit with the length of this strap, you can fiddle a little bit with the length of this leather, you can fiddle a little bit with the length of the lower attachment. So if you leave all three a little bit long, you have three places that you can fiddle, right? And get it just exactly right here in the last step as you're attaching and making your final measurements. You also want to make sure that these buckles are in the same place relative to each other. So, fit them on the person that's going to be wearing the pack. And then once you have one just right, then measure out and make the other side identical so it's not pulling cockeyed on the wearer. And then the same is going to be important when we put the holes in here. Okay? And, there, because these cloth straps might not be exactly the same length. We're going to measure everything from the rope here, which is the final attachment point, measure there out to here, from the top down, not from the bottom up. Okay? So it's really, really important that you keep all of that straight. Now, to put the buckle in with this style of buckle, you can see it wraps around the central piece. We want the prongs facing up so that when it pulls, it's pulling them into itself, okay? Not if you put it down and then when you pull on the prongs, it's going to open up the buckle, right? So that goes up, okay? And then we're just cutting, and I've measured this one, but I haven't cut it because I just wanted to show you the measurement, okay? We're going to cut a 3/4 inch slit, okay? I'm not going to remove material. I want this to spread out. I did what I just advised you not to do and installed these before I had my final buckles. Okay? And that happened. I did have a buckle initially, and I sized these to my initial buckle, and then I decided I didn't want to use that, wanted to upgrade the buckle a bit. So these are just a little bit bigger. And by cutting a slit and forcing that material out to the sides, it takes up that little bit of extra space that resulted from that, okay? So I'm cutting a slit rather than cutting out an oval. If, as is the case with these, which are sized perfectly, it fits with tension and a little bit of reluctance, then I would cut out an oval, because forcing it to expand out to the sides, it would no longer fit. Okay? That would not be good. So because it's a little undersized, I'm just cutting a slit, forcing it out, and that'll just make it a little bit more secure. Okay? This is fairly thin leather, but it's got plenty of tensile strength for this purpose. It's not going to rip. So no big deal. However, I do want it, very, very secure so it doesn't stretch and get sloppy. That would be annoying. These, if anything ever happens to these pieces, I can just cut the threads and sew a new one on, no big deal. However, these are anchored into the core of the backpack, and if I have to rip those stitches and redo them, I would be annoyed. Okay, so we don't want to do that. It's doable, but it's going to be annoying, so we don't want to have to do that. Okay, so what we'll do is we will use this as a template, cut that off, measure a 2-inch square, pre-punch those holes on one side so that they're marked, because all of this is it's real fiddly to get this lined up for that stitching. So pre-punch the holes on one side, cut your slits, put your buckle in, fold it back, stitch it together, and it will look like this side. There you go. We have one completed adventure pack. So I have set this up with the buckle in the first 2 hole placements. Renee tried it on with a t-shirt, and it's perfect for t-shirt. And even though I'm still wearing a vest, I heard some geese last night, and we're moving into t-shirt weather and out of thick, heavy coat weather, so I'm going to leave well enough alone for the time being. We have 6 inches of space to move into as we get into colder weather, and you'd have to have one heck of a heavy coat to need more than 6 inches of strap extension. Right? So this came out just about perfect with this arrangement. So I hope that you've enjoyed this, and I hope you're inspired to make your own. It's really a neat pack. It's super comfortable, and I'd love if you made them for your own adventures. And I hope that you come along for more of ours here at Old Ways Rising Farm. But until then, have a blessed day.